I spent more than 30 hours building a Nether themed zoo that spans across every dimension of Minecraft. So quite a while ago I came up with the idea for a Nether themed zoo. The thing is, I started the build in the overworld because I wanted to create what I came to call the hub. A large underground structure that connects all the dimensions of Minecraft, like a stronghold with extra steps, which is exactly where I also got the inspiration for the look of the hub. And so I started by creating a large hollow sphere comprised of a mixture of stone bricks and mossy stone bricks. I had this idea for the hub that the room you would walk into would have a floor of glass, and the bottom half of the sphere would be a reflection of the top half, but filled with water, where glow squid would swim around. But before I filled everything with water, I wanted to come up with the design for the nether portals that would take you to the main part of the zoo. And at first, I thought nether bricks would be a good look since they originate from the nether, and it would help make the transition between dimensions already start in the overworld. But I didn't really like this look at all, and instead I went back to making something that was more stronghold inspired. So I made this very tall skinny portal, and unfortunately they aren't actually possible in survival because they are so tall. But if you want to make something similar, you could split them in the middle right at floor level. After finishing those portals, I went on to make the podium in the middle for the end portal. Originally, I thought I would find a naturally generated portal, but I realized, wait, you can just build those when you're in creative mode. And I decided that that would probably be a better way to go about it, especially if I ever want to put this world up for download. Then you guys won't have to travel 1,000 blocks to see the build like usual. Anyways, I then hollowed out the 4 corners of the sphere. Not that a sphere has corners, but you know what I mean. 3 of these were gonna function as cages for some hostile mobs in the zoo, and the 4th one would lead to some sort of corridor that would take you to the surface. As you have probably noticed, the build was pretty dark at this point when I turned shaders on. So to try and fix this, I started decorating the cylinder walls with patterns where I incorporated lanterns to light everything up just a little bit. And at this point I hadn't actually finished the so-called corners of the sphere, so I went back and added some iron bars to the entrances, and when I reached the 4th one, I started to make the corridor that would lead to the zoo entrance on the surface. I pretty quickly came up with a simple repeating pattern for the walls of the corridor, so I just copy-pasted it until I realized that the direction I was headed was straight into a giant mountain. So I made a 90-degree turn so that the mouth of the corridor would end up being in the snowy area somewhat lower on the mountain. Then I decided it was finally time to fill the bottom half of the sphere with water, but I can tell you now that I should probably have waited to do this until the end, because afterward, every time I mirrored something down and had to fix something manually, I would have to do it underwater, which was just a teensy bit annoying. But anyways, I continued putting more decorations on the walls to light up the otherwise extremely dark build, and you know, my frenzy to light everything up didn't stop on the walls. Oh no. I continued adding more lights hanging from the ceiling, and along the way I was constantly mirroring everything down to make the floor almost like a giant mirror. And I'm not really sure where I first saw this mirroring thing done, but I definitely know it was not an original idea of mine, because ever since I saw it, I've wanted to make something similar myself. Anyways, now that my dream of making a mirrored build has almost come true, it was time to fill the huge aquarium that I had created with a bunch of glow squids. Because, look, these poor mobs might not have added much to the game, but at least they look nice with shaders. To finalize the overworld section of the zoo, I finished by adding some glowberries and mobs to the corner cages and some lanterns to the corner leading to the surface. Now we are entering the second phase of this build, which is also the main part, also known as the actual Nether Zoo. First, I spaced out where the 4 portals were gonna go according to the math I had done, and then I went on to build the main portal structure on the nether side of the zoo. The structure was gonna be right smack dab in the center of the zoo, and I wanted it to look like it was sort of like a support structure holding up the nether roof, compared to what I had built in the overworld, where I had a pretty firm idea of what the hub should look like ahead of time. This part of the zoo was much more experimental, which which also meant the process of building became a lot more sporadic, and I find when I build like that, it can be hard to know when you're finished. So to prevent myself from starting a build I would never finish, I decided to create a large sphere around the nether portals that would decide the boundary of where the zoo would go. Then I started terraforming to make the space for the zoo more open, but it didn't take me very long before I got distracted and started building what would be the area for the striders. And this little building sidetrack was also where I pretty much came up with a palette and the general meta for how the rest of the zoo would be built, meaning how I encase the edges in nether brick and have these little pockets of light along the walls and a mixture of blocks for the path. Then I just continued terraforming until I was satisfied with the area, and I also smacked in some more support pillars. The next thing I built was a stair leading from what I dubbed the ground level of the zoo to some of the higher seated areas, because that's one of the few great things about the nether. When you're building, there are lots of opportunities to give your build height variations. Like in my previous zoo I built, I created a whole artificial cave just to give the path system some more intricacy, but in the nether, you basically get that for free. But anyway, by now I was starting to have a general idea of how I wanted to shape this zoo, and so it was time to start filling it with mobs. And since I'd already tackled an easy mob, the striders, I decided the next one should be one of the mobs I personally despise the most, aka the ghast. And so I made a huge glass cylinder because ghasts can obviously fly, so you kinda have to enclose them on all sides if you don't want them to leave. Up next were the magma cubes, and for those I just made this long windy path all the way down to a naturally generated lava lake below and made that their pen. Now we all know that the nether got a lot more exciting after 1.16 with the new biomes and stuff. Unfortunately, the area I was working with really only had crimson forest and nether waste and a tiny sliver of basalt delta, so I decided I would make a warped forest manually, possibly to house some endermen. Then I built a bastion to house some brutes and piglins, and since this part was built on stream, I let chat decide some of the names, and there were some great ones such as Bob and SpongeBob and Kevin. Oh yeah, and thank you so much to the people who watched the stream. I was kind of nervous throughout the whole thing because I have never streamed before, but I had a really great time with you guys and you were all so sweet. And is this where I should also throw in a shameless plug to tell you to subscribe to catch possible future streams? Or just to support me on the road to 1,000 subs? Anyways, back to what is happening in the video. Someone in chat suggested one of the probably best ideas for this build. I kind of wish I had come up with it myself. It was to make geodes in the walls and have mobs captured inside of them. Honestly, I just think this idea turned out so well. After the stream ended, I got back to expanding the path system, and I wanted to connect the ground level of the zoo to this plateau near the ceiling. So I had to get a little creative with my path making and even dug a tunnel to get all the way up there. Then it was time for my second stream of this build, which also went pretty well, except for the fact that I forgot to record the first hour with replay mod. So instead, you just get to see the final product of the warped area, which we had turned into a roller coaster for colored sheep because they very much belong in the nether. Anyways, I once again continued my path system, this time making my way up next to the basalt delta, and I even managed to make it loop and have a little bridge. I'm not sure if that's something worth being proud of, but I kinda am. At this point in the build, I still had a lot of big empty areas, and to quickly eliminate some of this, I made a huge pen for zombie piglins. And fun fact, did you know that magma cubes can swim up lava? Well, I didn't until I suddenly noticed that Lisa 1, 2, and 3 were missing from their magma cube area, so I put them back and continued building. But now I was sort of entering a new phase of building. If you've ever built large, semi-unplanned builds like this one, you know there comes a point in the process where you start coming back to areas you've already been and start polishing them to the point where you can be satisfied calling them done. And that's exactly what I did for the next few hours. I terraformed and I polished. And from here on out, I think you're gonna hear me say that a lot, because after I was done with the area around the bastion, I terraformed and polished the warped area. Then I expanded the warped area and terraformed and polished that. Then I went on, and can you guess it? I terraformed and polished the Crimson Forest area. Remember when I built a path up to this area and then just didn't build anything up here? Well, now it was time to do something, and I decided to turn this into another warp area because those were actually pretty easy to make. Then there was this other area I also built a stair to and then just left. But this time I felt I couldn't just rely on the ever easy to create warped forest, so I actually turned this into a completely custom biome where I thought maybe skeleton horses and ravagers could roam. Then I built a tiny hidden away biome from the overworld, and if you are a regular of my channel, you will know this particular biome shows up surprisingly often because the mushroom biome has over the last year become one of my personal favorites. Anyways, at this point I had been working on this build for so long that my brain started formulating some stories to go along with the different parts of the zoo. Like, what if the geodes were sort of like a different type of mob spawner, and according to the color, different mobs would belong inside? So I created a green one where I placed a slime, and further up the same path I also made a yellow one filled with bees. Then while I had been bringing those sweet innocent bees into the hell dimension of Minecraft, I started to formulate some even darker lore around this zoo, and I came up with the idea to build a bunch of hanging cages where I would place different peaceful mobs from the overworld, and I had already built something similar in the overworld right above the end portal, so it felt fitting to capture a bunch of mobs in the Nether. Now you have been watching me build this Nether area of the zoo for about 7 minutes, which means you have probably forgotten what it looked like at the beginning, but no worries, because let me just give you a few before and after shots. Before, after, before, after, before, after. I know, quite a difference. Anyways, because I was done with both the overworld and the Nether now, it meant I had finally reached the end dimension. And just to be clear, all the things I had built until now had taken around 24 hours, and now I was in the final stretch. I wanted to turn the end island into one big petting zoo, themed around ancient Greek temple structures, and just in general use as much quartz as possible. Originally, I had talked with the people on stream about adding an escalator to the entrance, but you know, that kind of thing just seems a little beyond me and my redstone capabilities, so instead I just built a stair leading into the first quartz temple. And if you've ever played with some of those Aether Dimension mods as a kid, you might also recognize that a lot of my inspiration for the rest of this island came from some of the ones I played with, where everything was just kind of lush and magical. So after placing a layer of grass over the entire island, I planned out the pathways and started working on the structure around the portal leading back to the overworld. My plan was to place different sizes of these pillar structure around the petting zoo, where they could either serve as decoration or as a place for zoo visitors to sit and take a little break. I also built some swirly trees, sort of inspired by willow trees, but also just with a design where I tried to make them look as magical as possible. And some of you might even remember I teased this particular tree on the channel a while back, so yeah, you can probably tell that this build has taken me about an eon to make. I wanted to turn one of the obsidian pillars into a lookout tower, so I built a long winding stair all the way to the top of the tallest one, and I'm pretty sure if I was in a zoo like this as a kid, I know I would be sprinting up and down those stairs 5 times while my mom slowly made her way up like a normal person. But I mean, that's probably not uncommon behavior for a kid. Then I started to cover large areas of the island in flowers and grass grass because I wanted a combination of animals to roam the island. And among those, I was planning for bees. I also wanted sheep and goats and bunnies, and I don't think any of those would mind a few flowers. Then I made this large curved structure to hang some lanterns from, and I'm pretty sure my structures at this point were drifting pretty far away from ancient Greek architecture. So I also added a sort of angel, magical, fairy thingy because obviously my zoo would need one of those. Then I finished the island by covering everything in moss-covered sea lanterns to light up the ground and tall grass to blend it all together. Finally, I added in the animals for petting, and that was the end dimension done. To finish this whole entire build properly, more than 30 hours after I started, I finally added a huge zoo sign right at the entrance in the overworld, and I think now it's time to give you a small tour of everything. So I think this is gonna be the absolute most speedy tour ever because this video is probably already really long and you've also just watched me build everything and we're finally down. I've actually added some extra details here and there, and I bet there are gonna be places where I realize I haven't finished something, but I mean, that is just how it goes. Anyways, in this part of the zoo, there are only 3 mobs. We have these vindicators, and in the next corner, we have some strays hiding behind some glowberries. And finally, we have a corner filled with Matildas, because that's what I sometimes call witches. Anyways, we could obviously go through the portal in the middle, but for now, I think we're gonna save the end for last. And we are here in the Nether. It's actually been a while since I've set foot in this part of the zoo. I think I'm just gonna start in this section over here. So when you walk up to the gas pen, you can actually view inside from below, just like Mr. Pig is doing. I love watching the sheep race around the tracks from afar. Anywho, let's continue down the windy path to the magma cubes. I actually think this area is pretty cozy. I should totally have built some benches down here. And that thing hanging from the ceiling is actually just repurposed decorations from the gas pen we just saw. Because I was too lazy to make more than one name tag, I've named basically all the zombie piglins claws. I don't know, it kind of makes me happy that they all have this weird hive mind mentality when they get mad, and now they also share one single name. Then there's this custom biome up here, probably one of the parts I like the most. And I've actually changed the gold blocks into raw gold because someone pointed out that that might look better, and I must say I agree. Up next, Crimson area. This area pretty much just houses hoglins and piglins, the 2 arch enemies as neighbors. Ha ha ha. Then we have this little pocket of overworld where zoo visitors can get a glimpse of the rare mushroom cows. Honestly, I bet it would be a pain to get mushrooms in the Nether in survival. Then we can walk up this ridiculously long path to the plateau. I've put some zombie villagers up here, but I might change that. They don't really fit that well in the Nether. Down the long windy path. This area around the bastion is also pretty cozy, as long as the blaze are behind glass at least. I'm actually really glad that we named all the piglins in the bastion on stream. Now I will forever have a little souvenir from my first stream in one of my worlds. In this extended warped area, I've placed some zombie horses. I know these aren't actually obtainable in survival, but I think they are very fitting for the warped forest. And we have reached the sheep coaster. Honestly, a true masterpiece. I mean, if you were to be imprisoned until the end of time, at least these sheep will have fun. And as we walk down this slightly narrow path, you will see the Enderman geode on your right. And further up ahead, we see yet another geode. This time, a slime one. And as we arrive near the Basalt Delta, you will soon notice the many cries of imprisoned animals. Okay, enough with the weird tour guide voice. This is actually the last area of the Nether to look at, and I think I have most of the friendly mobs captured here. Except for you. How did you get out? I've made a friend. Anyways, that pretty much concludes this part of the tour. Now we go back to the overworld. And from here we can walk straight to the end dimension. Here we are. So this whole island was inspired by those petting zoos you go to as a kid. I mean, you can probably also go as an adult. I've definitely pet a lot of goats in those places. And I swear your hands always smell like goat for so long after you've been there. And for those who have never smelled a goat, it isn't really a good smell. Anyways, I think we'll start by walking to the lookout tower and take a look at everything from above. Do you want some wheat, Mr. Sheep? It's actually a pretty nice view from up here. I can spot most of the mobs, but I can't really see any rabbits. I don't hope they've all jumped in the void. That would be kind of tragic. Anyways, let's continue. I seriously love how this tree turned out. I do build custom trees every now and then, but I've never built any ones like these on the island. Hey, there are actually still rabbits. Hello, little one. Want some carrot? Then there's this little lookout area over here. And I think if we can hit, let's say, 25 likes on this video, that's fair, right? Then I'll put the build up for download for free. Hey, more rabbits! And now we are almost at the end of our tour. We just gotta jump in. Alright, that was it. The whole tour. I really hope you enjoyed the build as well and everything. And that was all I had for you in this video. And I'll see you in the next one.